All right, we're continuing in the book Torah Or, which was written by the first Chabad Rebbe, Rebbe Shneur Zalman, some 200 years ago, a little bit more than 200 years ago. And it's explaining God. It's explaining what is God, what is the Jewish idea of God, and how the Jewish concept of what God is very, very, how do you say, obligating. It really obligates us. It forces us to act in a totally different way, to have totally different values in life, essentially not to think about ourselves at all, not to think about receiving anything. But the idea is to give. To give, of course, you have to receive in order to give, but the idea is to give what? To give blessing to this world, to give a meaning to this world, to make the world holy, to make every detail of the world, to reveal the Creator in every aspect of his creation, to reveal what a miracle life is and how much we owe the Creator every moment, and how the Creator gives us everything, whether we serve him or not, and how the Creator is creating us constantly, whether we deserve it or not, because somehow or other we must deserve it, because he's creating us. Here we go. So when a person feels this, when he feels how close and real the Creator is, and how amazing a miracle it is that I'm just here, I'm alive, and I have a body and existence and consciousness and a soul, and I breathe and I talk and I have free will. These are all amazing miracles, and we should use them for what the Creator wants us to use it for. That's all he demands from us. Oh. So that's ideally the whole idea of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple is a place where you could serve God exactly. Good morning, Dovi.
Morning, Rabbi Bolton.
How are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, here we go. So let's go back to the original sentence that the Rebbe is talking about here, and just to see how far we've gotten in understanding it. According to the Hasidic view, second, 1 minute. I'm sorry, it's like this. It's way at the bottom of the page. I always say. Here it is. This is how this week's Torah portion, Torah reading begins. Vayakel Moshe gathered all the Jewish people, and he said to them, 6 days you should work, you should do work, and on the seventh day will be for you Shabbat Kodesh, it'll be holy. Shabbat Shabbaton Lashem, a double Shabbat, Shabbat Shabbaton, a resting rest to God, a returning return. Okay, what does this mean, a returning return? What does it mean? First of all, this sentence here is an introduction to the main topic, which Moses is telling the Jewish people exactly to how and to start building in the tabernacle in the desert. It's basically a repetition of what we learned 3 weeks ago in Parshat Truma. But over there, the order was a little bit different. Over there, when that was God speaking to Moses, God telling Moses what to do. Here, Moses is telling the Jewish people what to do. When God tells Moses what to do, is he starts off talking about the vessels of the temple, tabernacle, the menorah, where they lit the 7-branched menorah, they lit the lamps, and the table with the showbread on it, with the face bread, and etc., and all the details of the vessels. And then that's number one. Number two, God told Moses about the building, how to be with the tents around it. Remember, it was a portable building with the tents and with the boards, and how to make it. And that was the building. And then the third thing God spoke about when he told Moses was about Shabbat, keeping Shabbat. But here, it's exactly the opposite order. Here, first of all, God talks about the Shabbat, and he calls it Shabbat Shabbaton. And then he talks about the house and the how to make the drapes and the room of the tabernacle. And then last thing, he talks about the thing that he talked about first when God told him, God told him first about the vessels. And here when Moses tells over the Jewish people, that's the last thing he tells them. Okay, and that was the question we had. So the Rebbe said that there's three types of light of God. How God is creating the whole world, right? So there's three types of, what do you call it, creative power, real revelation of God. Three types. One is called how God fills the world. One is talking about how God surrounds the world, above our understanding, incomprehensible. And one is talking about God's essence. The three aspects of God. And those correspond to, in Torah, number one are the drapes and the building that's surrounding, that corresponds to the commandments. The commandments surround our understanding. We don't understand the commandments. We just do them. That's like the limbs of God, so to speak. Then we have the vessels in the tabernacle. The vessels in the tabernacle, that corresponds to the Torah. The Torah goes inside of us. We understand the Torah. That's the inside. What is this thing of the essence of God? The soul, and that's going to be Shabbat. We're going to see it. Let's go. Oh, inyan Shabbat. The whole idea of Shabbat goes to God. So, am I recording this? Yes. That's the idea of Shabbat, Shabbaton Hashem. This is the idea of a double Shabbat to God. What does this mean? So the Rebbe explained, what is Shabbat? In general, what is Shabbat? What is Shabbat? Shabbat is only for the Jewish people. The non-Jews are not supposed to keep Shabbat. Shabbat is a special day for the Jewish people. Why so? Because it wants to tell us, Shabbat, that the essence of God is creating all these details. That God is the creator. All the 6 days, that's creation day. God created the world in 6 days. That's creation day. That's creation day. 6 creation days where God is creating the world. The 7th day is the creator day. And the Rebbe gives an example like a painter that paints a picture, or somebody, a worker that builds a house. When he's painting, when he's building, so he puts all his energy out. And finally, when he finishes, so he steps back and all this energy comes back to him. He gets pleasure from what he's done. The same thing is with God. God created the world in 6 days, and the 7th day he rested. Now, of course, you have to think about this for 1 second, and leave in, let's say, 10 seconds. I mean, God could have created the whole world in 1 instant. When he created the world, he created time. So there was really no time. God didn't take time to create the world. God created time. Before God created the world, there was no such thing as time. And there was no space. There was no being. There was no existence. These are the things that God created. We don't have any idea what God is. All we know is that he is. He's creating the world. Here we are. And these Kabbalists and these people can explain it to us. What does it mean? But that's the fact what it is. So it says, God could have created the world in 1 instant. Why did he schlep the thing out for 6 days? Why? And every day had in it 24 hours, and 12 hours was night, and 12 hours was, and every hour has 60 minutes. And this goes according to Kabbalistic principles. This goes according to deep Kabbalistic principles that are explained. There's a book called Sefer Yetzirah. So God created the world according to certain principles, and those principles are from the Torah. But one of the main reasons, why did God do the whole business? Why did he create it? So it says he created the world in order to put man in the world, in order that man should make this world a perfect place. That's why God did it. This is obviously more deep and intimate and personal and real than we're making it here. But that's the fact, that we exist because of this plan. And there's a planner, and that's what's revealed on Shabbat. On Shabbat, we realize that there's a planner, unless you want to make your own plans. You can make your own plan. Napoleon did it, and Karl Marx did it, and what's his name, Sigmund Freud, and all these other. They say this, the mistaken people. They did, right? The blind leading the blind. But nevertheless, they had their plan. What are we doing here? Why are we here? What is the reason for it? What is this? Right? So here the Rebbe is telling us that there's a real reason, and the reason is that God is creating us, and He's creating us so that we should act normal, right? It's very popular nowadays, this thing, coaching, because people know that they're not doing what's right. They know that they're living not like, but with coaching, it's even more, because it's telling you how to achieve these goals that are just very mundane goals. And most people are miserable and unfulfilled because the goals are false, right? This teaches you how to achieve your goals. What's your goal? Is to be, successful and to be powerful and to be rich and to be this. And finally you get to be successful and powerful and rich, and you realize that, good, I have all this money, but then I don't know who I am. What am I doing here? Then you got all these false religions that tell you, I'll tell you who you are. You're going to go to heaven. You're going to get pleasure. This world is just little pleasure. You get big pleasure. The whole thing is wrong, right? And then there's all the philosophers that say there is no purpose. Just, do whatever you want. Life is just but a dream. That's like these French guys. There's nothing, there's no purpose, there's no meaning. Well, that's all false. It's not so. The fact is that everybody's infinitely important. And everybody is being created constantly by the Creator for a unique purpose, and everybody with that purpose unfolds as you are. But we have to know that the general pattern, at least that's the message of Judaism, the general plan, the instruction, the manufacturer's instructions, that's the Torah. And not everybody can explain what the Torah says. You have to sit and learn, be really serious about it. Right? You really be serious about it. It depends more on your heart than it does on your head. A lot of times a person can be a genius in the whole Torah, and he can come to the conclusion that idolatry is right. That's what they did with the golden calf. So here's the Rebbe, we want to get on the right track. I mean, the essence of Judaism, the first of the two Ten Commandments is, don't worship any other gods except for the God that took the Jews out of Egypt. How do you do that? By the Torah. That's where does it say don't worship any gods? That's the Torah. That's what the Torah says. So that's the manufacturer's instructions. But first of all, we have to believe and feel that there is a manufacturer, there's a creator, and that he cares. And that's the idea of Shabbat. That's what it means, Shabbat, Shabbaton to God, Kihini, because Ham Shachat Ratzon Elyon, that will we cause God to react to what we do. When we draw down God's will, right? We said that's a very basic message of Chassidut that's coming to the world, that God reacts to what we do. This is not anything new. We did not make this up. It says clearly in the Torah, Nachat Ruach, that God gets pleasure from what we do. It says in order to draw down this will, this pleasure of God into the world, Shu B'chinat Ratzon, and this is God's will power, which is above understanding. Hanimshach, which is ground down and revealed in Shabbat. We said before that was the extra soul. Remember we talked about that yesterday? Every Jew gets an extra soul on Shabbat. Hu davka, this is only kishiyesh kli. You have to have a vessel. You have to have a vessel for this. In general, you have to have vessels in life, right? You go into a class in nuclear physics, you don't understand, right? Even basic mathematics, they could be talking a different language. You don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes they get these poor people in the street. A normal person, he wins the lottery in America, $100 million, right? He doesn't know what to do with the money. He doesn't know. He goes berserk. He buys himself the biggest house he can possibly be. He realizes he still has another $98 million left. What does he do? So he buys, another $100,000 worth of clothes and this, and finally he starts buying, bottles of the best liquor, and then they find him dead, after a month or so. But if one of his relatives don't kill him to get the money, or you have to have vessels to receive blessings. So you have to have a blessing. What is the blessing? The blessing is Ratzon Tachton, that we want to connect to God, that we want to connect to the truth. Shenolad min haseichel, that this is a desire to God which comes from our contemplation. That's what we said before, remember? That's Chabad. Chabad is Chachma bin Adat. Chachma means having the right idea what God is, having the right idea, conception. Bina means to think about this idea, to contemplate it, right? What does it imply? If God is really creating us, God really did give the Torah, God really wants us to serve him, right? Those are just ideas. That's chachma. Bina means, what does this imply? That's what we're learning here, the implication. But that means to connect it to yourself. It has to be real. You can understand ideas of Hasidut and understand ideas of Torah and understand ideas of everything and be, give lectures on it and not do any of it. Like the marriage counselor that goes home and beats his wife. He can give everybody the best advice in the world. He writes books about it, right? And then they find out after he dies, they interview his wife. He said, he was terrible. He used to beat me all the time. He was just screaming at the kids all the time. The man was a madman. But to write books and to give advice, genius, nothing like him. The same thing was with the Torah. You can read, you can learn, you can build a holy temple. You can do whatever you want, but if your heart is not in the right place, right, with God, so you can go and be the Pope or something. Who knows? You can be an idolatry. Christianity is idolatry. That's what they did with the golden calf. They heard God, they saw God, they were in Mount Sinai, they got out of Egypt, and they worshiped the golden calf. How did they do that? Because their heart wasn't in the right place. Their heart was thinking about themselves. I'm going to get I. That's what it means. You have to think about God. When you think about God, then you have a will for God. This is thinking about the 6 days of creation. That's the idea of the 6 days of creation. That's, what do we say? That's our days. Shabbat is God's day. On these days that are supposed to be our days, what are we supposed to do? We have to do our part. Our part is work. What do you have to work? Work at thinking and contemplating what really is God. That's the hitbonenut in the 6 days of creation. This is what's called the lower will. By means of this, we have a will to God. This becomes a vessel of the upper will of God. That can be drawn down inside of it, mamish, really, in a way of, a blessing. Or when this light comes into the vessel, mamish. I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's a good example, but maybe it is. If you look at anything in the world, you have to make a vessel, and then from the vessel there can be light. Maybe one of the best examples is music, right? But there's also the same thing as sports. You practice and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice. You practice with your fingers. You practice doing scales. You practice doing this. Same thing with sports. You practice. There's 1,000 people that are practicing the same. 10,000 people are practicing, right? To be boxers, to be baseball players, to be pianists, to be violinists, to be whatever they practice. And then you're presented with the reality, right? You get into the game. All of a sudden, there's one person. They realize he's the big genius in basketball. He's the big genius in boxing. He's the big genius in pianist. He's the best pianist. Everybody. They do the same thing, but him just comes this special, amazing blessing that no one knows where it comes from. And everybody, the stadiums are packed and the auditoriums are packed just to see this person, right? Because something comes through him. I read somewhere that says, I said this before, but I don't know, that once Beethoven wrote a concert, a symphony, I don't know what it was anyway, he wrote parts over there that for the violin, and the violin, it's impossible to play. There's like notes that you can't play, and you can't, places where you jump around from one note to another, something like that is too fast, to whatever. And they said to him, a violin can't play this. This is not this is above or below the range of a violin. And he said, God is talking to me. When I write these, God is talking to me. What do I care about your puny violin? In other words, it's a blessing from above. Suddenly he gets these ideas, but you have to have the vessels. You have to have the right vessels. If you don't practice playing the piano, you can have the most beautiful pieces in playing, and the inspiration doesn't come through because the vessel isn't right. So he says that's what you have to have, a vessel for the blessing of God. What is the blessing of God? This upper love. You have to have what's called the lower love. You have to practice. You have to think and contemplate about what God is, and does God really exist, and does God really create me, and did God really give the Torah? Can it really be that God is enlivening me right now? Until you feel it. That's what's called the lower will. This lower will that you get from understanding what you can about God, even though that it's below from this upper will of God, this genius arousal that you get from God, that you really love Him, and this is accessible to everybody. Unlike being a master pianist, or not everybody can become a master. But as far as loving God, this is accessible to everyone. But you have to make the vessel first. You have to think about God. And this blessing of true love for God, this is God's reaction to what we do. We have to at least make a vessel. The vessel it's a vessel, and this vessel is of thinking about God, wanting God, desiring to be connected to the Creator. This is a vessel, legile ratzon, for God's blessing that comes into it, which will be in it, then you really come to love God. And that's what we said was the extra soul on Shabbat. Why is it we get an extra soul on Shabbat? And it says that's an extra deep love of God. And why don't we feel it? It's because we didn't make a vessel for it in the 6 previous days. That's what it says, Shabbat, Shabbaton. That's what it says. It's a double Shabbat, a rest, a days of return. What does it mean? Shabbat, Shabbaton. This is the 2 levels of will. One is Shabbat that we do, and the other one is the Shabbaton that God does. He brings it down to us. One is the vessel that we make. We want to connect to God. We want to be aware of God. And the other is the amazing blessing that God gives us. Shemachabrim, that it joins both of these together. And they were really one. Balashan and Shabbaton, and that's what it means, Shabbat, Shabbaton to God. Now again, we started the class with this sentence, that this is how this week's Torah portion begins. Yakel Moshe, that Moshe gathered the Jewish people, and he said 6 days you should work, and the 7th day is holy, Shabbat, Shabbaton to God. Why? To Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, to this name of God. Ha'inuki Shem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, this name of God. Hine, the Yud, this is Chachma. The Hey is Bina. Like we just finished saying. And B'Shabbat, this is Shabbat to God. Mitgala, that God, He does His part. The rest of the days, we do our part. We make a vessel. We're trying, we're desiring to serve God. Right? Like the piano player. He's practicing and practicing. He has a desire. He wants to be a genius piano player. He wants to. So, but he wants to, and he makes a vessel for it. Then after that comes the blessing. Then God reacts, or in our case, the music. Then the music starts to work in him. Then suddenly the Jew reveals the true will of God, which is above the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is above the Creator. This Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, this is God's personality. We're talking about the essence of God. All right, so what did we say before? We said that the drapes and the building of the tabernacle, that corresponds to this aspect of God, which is called Sovev Kolmi. The vessels, that corresponds to Mamali Kolmi, that God is filling the world. That's like the Torah. And the veils and the rooms of the tabernacle, that's like the commandments. But first of all comes the Shabbat. What's the Shabbat? That we have to think about who's commanding us to do all this stuff. Where is this coming from, this holy temple? This is coming from God. And in order to do that, we have to connect to God. It means we have to think very deeply about God. Then we can come to a certain arousal and love for God. That's our arousal from below. And then God, that's only the vessel. And then God fills that with a true realization of what God is. That's the sentence. It says, Kael Deus Hashem. It says that God is a God of how do you say, of views. Views is a good word, deot. Of awarenesses. Kael Deot Hashem. God is a God of awarenesses. two types of awareness of God. One of them is what's called the upper awareness of God. The other one is called the lower awareness of God. What does this mean, upper awareness? That we look at the world, how God looks at it. That all there exists is God, and this world is just this amazing miracle. The lower awareness of God is that we look at the world from our point of view, that this world is what really exists, and God is the miracle. That's what it means, awareness. God, the dot means ratzon, that you're aware of something. In our case, means that you want it. The dot, v'ratzon, are called inyan echad. The awareness and will is the same thing. When I'm aware that this person is my father, then I have a will to love him. If you'll be aware of something that's really, if you have an awareness of something that's really desirable, then you desire it. Like it says, Rak etchem yadati. God said, only you I am aware. In this case, yadati means like connection. I connect to, maybe that's a better word for connection. Two connections. Like God says, I knew you, I'm connected to you, Jewish people from all the families. Hakavana means shebacharti, that God chooses and he wants us. God wants, he chose the Jewish people to be a special nation. That's what it says in the Bible. Kidat, that's what it means, kel deot. Being aware, this is also the language of hakara, awareness, like I said. Shezeu brings his kashrus, to attach yourself, hamevi lidei ratzon, will. Right, like you lose a lady loses her diamond ring, her wedding ring, right? And someone finds it and says, is this yours? Oh, I recognize it. That's it. I want it. It's yours. The same thing, recognizing God, being aware of God, means a connection to it. I want it. Cain, also a person, Yodea, Lashon is kashrus v'ischabrus. And also when it says that man knew his wife, right? Adam, when he knew his wife, means he was attached to her, gave birth to children. Attached. Inyan Zeh, that's Deo. That's what it means. Two types of attachment to God, two types of awareness to God. It's the same word. The word dot means attachment, awareness, connection. This is joining to the, and when it says that God is a God of knowledges, of connections, of awarenesses, plural, means that God is able to attach these two types of awareness. Namely, what? That he reveals the highest aspect of his existence, of God, is revealed in the lowest aspect where we are. That the way God looks at the world connects to the way we look at the world. And so in other words, we maintain our identity, we retain our feeling of separateness from God, and at the same time, we feel totally connected to God. What does that mean? It means that we feel that the fact that we are separate entities and separate creations and unique, and we apparently separate from God, we use that in order to serve God. We use our uniqueness in order to love, in order to serve God in our unique way, each person on his own. But as that's the level of Shabbat Shabbaton. That's what's called a day of rest, a return to the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. What does it mean? That God also rests. God is also, that's what it means, Keil Deot. That's what it means, that God is a God of connections, of awarenesses, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. That God unites these two desires, that the Ratzon Elyon, that God's essence, his desire, his love for the Jewish people and also for the world, which is above understanding, this shines and is revealed also in our low will from this world, that we want to attach from our separateness and our distance, we want to attach to God. So God unites them, but we simultaneously feel separate and we feel totally connected to God. How is this possible? It is totally not possible. With God, everything is possible. This is the whole idea of the extra soul on Shabbat. This is the revelation of the upper will of God. In the language of Kabbalah, this is called Yechidah. This is the whole purpose of Chassidut, especially Chassidut Chabad, is to awaken and to arouse and to reveal this level of Yechidah, the essence, deep essence level of the Jewish soul. That's why only Jews have this thing of Shabbat. That's why it's called Nishama, Nishmat Chol Chai. That's why this level of Yechidah is called the soul of all life. That is the essence above all life. Like we say, Masbia l'kol chai ratzon in the Psalm Ashrei. That God satisfies all living things, including the upper will, including the angels and everything, that they're all flaming up to God. That's also part of the lower will. This is the revelation of God's upper will. God's essence is drawn down into a level which is called Kol Chai. Kol Chai means the life of this world. Umisham, from there, it's drawn down to be Ratzon Yireyav Yaseh, that God does what those who fear Him, namely that's revealed in this physical world, the upper will of God. Okay, so what do we learn? We're learning a little bit about what Shabbat is. That in the temple, in the tabernacle, there were three aspects: how God fills the world. That's the vessels. How God surrounds the world, is above the world. That's the the curtains, etc. And then there's the essence of God. That's the thing of Shabbat. When it was forbidden to work on Shabbat, even to build the tabernacle. That's what this Torah portion starts off with. You want to build the tabernacle? First of all, know about Shabbat. 6 days you should work. In other words, you should think about God, contemplate the reality of God, the truth of God, until you come to what's called lower will. And then from that, you get Shabbat. That's the seventh day. Shabbat, that's called Shabbat Shabbaton. That God's level of Shabbat enters into yours. God reacts to what we do. That's what's called the upper will of God. And that's the third element which is in the Holy Temple, namely not just the vessels, not just the house, but also the will of God is revealed there. And that is relevant to each and every one of us. We'll see how this is even more relevant tomorrow, God willing. Now let's continue in the Devar Malchut.